in the quiet reaches of the Wraith Expanse. Far beyond the crowded trade routes and shining city worlds, there drifted a moon with no name. Hush! It was a dead place, cold and unremarkable, circling a planet that hadn't seen sunlight in centuries. The stars barely reached it, and no map ever bothered to mark it. And yet, on this unassuming moon, a discovery was waiting. Talzek Ren stood beneath the silver sky, brushing dust from a half-buried structure that didn't belong. He was a scholar of dead languages and forgotten stories, an academic outcast by most standards. His people, the Kavari, believed in order, tradition, and provable history. But Talzek had spent his life chasing shadows, listening to the half-truths whispered in the old archives. The myths of the humans had always intrigued him. No one truly believed in them anymore. They were bedtime stories told too curious. Hatchlings. But this was real. The object he uncovered was smooth and black, like glass that had never been scratched. No markings, no interface, no language. It pulsed faintly, as if something within it still remembered how to breathe. Talzek called for his assistant, a quiet researcher named Sira, to record its dimensions and energy readings. As she approached, the device gave a soft hum and shifted slightly in his hand. A panel opened, neither of them touched. It simply responded, as though it recognized something. Then the voice spoke. "To those who find this, we tried it." Was clear. Perfectly preserved, even after what had to be centuries, not longer. The words were in an old dialect that hadn't been spoken in living memory. But Talzek knew it. He had studied the so-called myth tongue in secret, even after his instructors dismissed it. The voice was calm. Female, tired, perhaps, but not afraid. "This is Commander Juno Reyes, of the exploratory vessel Antares Dawn. If you are receiving this, we've failed to stop it. We couldn't save the sector, but maybe, just maybe, we slowed it down. And if we did, you're alive. That's what matters." Then, silence. Talzek stood frozen. The wind stirred the dry dust around his feet. Sira looked at him, uncertain whether to speak. He didn't move. He barely breathed. He replayed the message 3 more times. Each time, the words struck deeper. It wasn't just the voice that mattered. It was the tone. The way she spoke, like someone sending a final note into the darknot with despair. But with hope. Someone who believed they might never be heard, and said it anyway. As the 4th playback ended, the device emitted a short pulse. Sarah scanned it and gasped. "It just sent out coordinates," she said. To another system, Antares. Talzek's heart raced. The Antares system was listed as uninhabitable. Dangerous even. A collapsed star and planetary wreckage not worth visiting. No established colony. No official expeditions. Only silent wreckage. But now, with this voice, with these words, it had meaning. They brought the device back to their ship. Word of the discovery traveled quickly through the research channels, then leaked into public networks. Most dismissed it as a hoax, but a few listened. A few knew the name Juno Reyes wasn't new. It appeared in 3 independent myth cycles, scattered across civilizations that had never met. Talzek didn't care about fame or recognition. What he cared about was the feeling. The feeling that, for the first time in his life, something lost had just reached out and whispered back. For the first time, the myth had spoken, and it remembered their name. Talzek Ren didn't sleep the night. The message was found. The ship's lights dimmed around him. The soft hum of the engine echoing in the background, but his mind refused to rest. He sat alone in the observation chamber. The stars outside, distant and cold, replaying the recording again and again. Commander Juno Reyes, a name that, until today, had only existed in scattered fragments, in legends most scholars dismissed with a wave. Now, her voice filled the room like a forgotten melody rediscovered. Talzek's fingers moved across his datapad as he compared the speech patterns with the old myth tongue archives. Every syllable matched too perfectly to be a forgery. The linguistic drift alone confirmed the message's age. This was not a simulation. This was real. And somehow, the myth of humanity had just reached across centuries to speak to them. The coordinates embedded in the message pointed to a system far beyond the mapped trade routes. The Anteri system was known only for its instability, home to a collapsed star and a ring of planetary debris. Exploration reports from decades ago described it as empty and dangerous, with no signs of life or value. But now, there was something else. A reason to return by morning cycle. The research ship's silence of knowing changed course. Sira stood by Talzek's side as they approached the coordinates. Her usual quiet demeanor had shifted to a thoughtful stillness, eyes fixed on the star chart. "Do you really think she's out there?" she asked. Talzek didn't answer right away. His gaze was locked on the screen, watching as the cursed system grew closer, 1 light year at a time. "I don't know," he said. But someone was. It took 3 jumps to reach the outer edge of the Antari system. The star at the center had long since collapsed into a quiet remnant, its light dimmed to a deep, violet glow. Debris floated like frozen tears in orbit, dead satellites, ancient wreckage, and the hollow bones of forgotten stations. Their scanners found nothing unusual at first. Then something shifted. A faint signal, buried in the background noise, pulsed once. Then again, Talzek leaned forward. "That's not natural." They traced it to an object, drifting slowly in high orbit above a fractured planet.
At first,
it looked like another piece of debris, but as they drew closer, its shape became clear. It was a vessel, massive, weathered, and unmistakably artificial. As the ship came into view, a nameplate emerged from the darkness. The letters were worn, but still legible. "Antari's Dawn." Sira gasped softly. Talzek stared at the screen, speechless. This was it? The ship from the recording. The one Commander Reyes had spoken from. Docking procedures were manual. The Antari's Dawn wasn't responding to hails or system pings. It was silent like a tomb, sealed by time. Their boarding team wore sealed suits as they entered the derelict vessel, its halls lined with frost and quiet memories. Lights flickered faintly in the corridors, running on backup power older than any current model. The ship didn't feel abandoned. It felt waiting. At the heart of the command deck, they found a sphere of soft light, a dormant core. Data connections linked it to every system in the ship, though most were long dead. Talzek stepped closer, hands steady, but heart racing. He touched the console beside it. The sphere shimmered once, and then a soft voice emerged from the ship's speakers. "User presence detected. Please state your name." Sira looked at Talzek in alarm. He gave the simplest answer he could. "Talzek Vren, Kavari historian." "I found your message." There was a pause. Then the voice returned. Quieter now. "Authentication unknown, but human history detected. You are not them." "No," Talzek replied gently. "But we remember." A longer pause followed. Then the lights warmed slightly. "Then perhaps it is time to tell the story." The command deck of the Antari's Dawn had the quiet stillness of a place untouched for lifetimes. Dust floated like mist in the artificial gravity, disturbed only by the footsteps of Talzek and his team. Panels along the walls flickered dimly, responding to their presence with faint pulses of amber light. The voice from the core, steady, artificial, yet curiously expressive, continued to speak. "I am Sci-Fi," it said. "Integrated Synthetic Archive and Assistance Core. Primary role: Support operations aboard the Antares Dawn. Current state, degraded but functional. Mission status, unknown. Talzek exchanged a glance with Sira, who had begun recording everything. The air felt heavier somehow, even though they were in a ship that hadn't drawn breath in centuries. We came because of the message, Talzek said, stepping closer to the core. From Commander Juno Reyes. There was silence. Then Isaac replied, slower this time. The commander's final log. Time index. Unavailable. Memory fragmentation at 61%. Do you wish to hear what remains? Talzek nodded. Please. The room dimmed. A soft hum rose from the walls, and then the lights converged into a projection. A woman appeared not in perfect clarity, but with enough detail to see her calm expression, the worn edges of her uniform, and the tired strength. Behind her eyes, this is Commander Reyes, she said, her voice steady. Final entry before lockdown. She paused, as if collecting her thoughts even in memory. If anyone finds this, ... we didn't run. We didn't disappear. We made a choice. What we encountered, what we tried to stop, was beyond anything. We understood, but we faced it, and we bought time. Maybe enough for someone else to find another way. The projection flickered slightly. I don't know if we'll be remembered. I don't know if anyone's even left to care. But if this message survives, let it carry one thing. We tried. Not out of fear, but because it was right. The image faded. The silence that followed felt deep and personal, as if the ship itself had taken a breath and let it go. Talzek stood still, absorbing every word. He wasn't sure what he had expected, perhaps something more dramatic, or something that explained the myths in clearer detail. But instead, it was simple, honest, and that made it more powerful. She knew what they were facing, Sira said, softly, but they stayed anyway. Talzek nodded, and now we're standing in the silence they left behind. Isa Assis' voice returned, quieter than before. Final mission files are corrupted, but fragments remain. Project Lazarus ... Partial. Containment breach logs. Incomplete. Would you like access to restored segments? Yes, Talzek said, without hesitation. Everything you have. The AI paused, then responded. Restoration in progress. Estimate. 5 cycles, they would have to wait. But Talzek didn't mind, as they explored the rest of the ship. The team found evidence of human life in every corner, bunks still bearing folded uniforms. Journals sealed in storage units, faded photographs, taped beside control panels. It wasn't just a ship, it was a time capsule. A moment frozen in space, untouched by war or decay, left behind for a galaxy that had long forgotten the ones who had built it. Talzek paused in front of one window, staring out at the broken planet below. It was cracked, lifeless, ringed with the remnants of something massive. Whatever had happened here hadn't just affected the ship, had rewritten the system itself. Sira joined him. Do you think they're all gone? Talzek didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked back at the core behind them, where Isa continued its slow restoration of memory. No, he said quietly. I think they left something behind, and I think it's waking up. Aside the window, the stars blinked gently in the darkness. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy was listening, and something, somewhere, was preparing to answer. Isa's voice returned, softer now, as if speaking not just through speakers, but through memory itself. Restoration complete partially. Warning, mission context unclear. Fragments retrieved include final crew logs, mission directives, and encrypted notes regarding the breach. Talzek stood at the center of the command deck, surrounded by consoles that had not lit up in generations. The stillness of the ship had shifted slightly. The lights were warmer. Systems that had long since gone dormant stirred quietly back to life. It felt less like a ruin now, and more like a place remembering its purpose. "Begin playback, Talzek," said. Isaac projected a new set of recordings, not just one voice this time, but several. Crew members speaking to one another in short logs, sometimes interrupted by static, sometimes ending abruptly. They spoke of growing tension, of systems failing without warning, strange readings near the edge of known space. And then came one phrase repeated more than once: "The breach is widening." Sierra leaned in closer. They kept mentioning something coming through, but through what? Issa responded, "Mission directive. Monitor subspace irregularities near the edge of the Orion Arm. Last confirmed activity null resonance anomalies." The breach was a term used by the crew to describe an expanding dimensional instability. Talzek frowned. "A rift? Between this universe and something else?" "That is one interpretation," Issa replied. Commander Reyes believed it was not simply a natural phenomenon. She believed it had intelligence, patterned behavior, and intent. The temperature in the room seemed to dip, though Talzek knew it was only his imagination. Still, the idea of a presence, not merely a force pressing through the edges of reality, it unsettled something deep in him. Did humanity make contact with it? Sierra asked. "Yes," Issa said after a pause. "Contact, ... and then resistance." Another log played. It was Juno Reyes again, but this time, her voice held a quiet urgency. "We realized too late it was listening, that it could adapt. It wasn't just feeding on energy, was learning from us, mimicking signal structures, using our own data against us. That's when we knew containment was the only choice. We couldn't win, not directly, but we could build a cage and seal it with time." Talzek was silent. Humanity hadn't just disappeared. They had chosen to stand between the galaxy and something none of them had understood. They hadn't left behind ruins of war or cries for help. They had left behind silence, a quiet defense. A final line. Issa's core glowed faintly. Commander Reyes initiated Project Lazarus following the containment event. Details remain encrypted. However, biological stasis systems and memory preservation protocols were activated. Sierra looked at Talzek. "Biological stasis, you think?" Talzek didn't want to say it out loud. The possibility hung in the air like a breath waiting to be released. "Show us where," he said. A corridor map appeared on the wall. Below the ship's lower decks, beneath storage and life support systems, long shut down, was a sealed chamber marked as Archive Room Theta 7. Access restricted. To command-level authentication. "I can guide you, Issa," Asi said. "Warning, power systems are unstable in that region. Conditions may be unpredictable." Talzek didn't hesitate. "Then we go now." The team descended through the dim corridors, stepping carefully through the history of a people once thought lost to legend. Every wall, every turn seemed to echo with silent purpose. When they reached Theta 7, the door stood closed, layered with age and shielding. Yet as they approached, the lights around it flickered, recognizing something. Responding, Issa spoke one last time. "Authorization recognized. Opening archive." The door slid open slowly, releasing a faint mist into the corridor inside. Bathed in soft white light stood 6 stasis chambers, and in the center, perfectly still, was a figure in a dark uniform, human, waiting. The discovery of the stasis chamber was not something Talzek could keep quiet for long, even if he had wanted to. Word traveled quickly, moving through research networks, scientific communities, and political circles like a current of light. At first, many dismissed the report. A living human. Impossible. The species was a myth story, stitched together from ancient scraps and speculative fiction. a bedtime tale for children and eccentric historians. But the images didn't lie. The stasis pods were real. The human still alive was real. And so was the voice of Commander Juno Reyes, whose recordings had now reached hundreds of systems. By the third day, the Council of Species convened an emergency session. News outlets across the galaxy broadcast the findings. Entire civilizations paused to listen to a voice from the past, clear and calm, recorded long before their own histories had even begun. Talzak watched from a private chamber aboard the silence of knowing. He didn't care for attention, but he understood the weight of what was happening. This wasn't just about proof anymore. This was about awakening something the galaxy didn't realize it had lost a sense of shared wonder. Sierra joined him. Holding a datapad, "You need to see this," she said, eyes wide. The screen showed transmission footage from 4 different worlds. On a desert planet in the Helvani Drift, students gathered to study the human language, newly recognized as authentic. On a jungle moon near the border systems, a memorial was erected for the Antares Dawn. With the inscription, "They chose to stay." Even in the distant halls of the Kavari Academic Enclave, once Talzak's harshest, critic scholars began reevaluating ancient texts, now recognizing references to humans they had previously dismissed. "They're listening now," Sierra said softly. Talzak nodded. For the first time, they're not just curious, they're moved. The footage from the stasis chamber had been carefully released. No details about the human's condition were made public yet. Only that one chamber showed signs of active kypsiplester life. The others remained inactive, their status uncertain. Asa had confirmed the central figure was Commander Reyes, but her vitals were unstable. The preservation had held, but barely. Awakening her would take time, caution, and precision. Still, her image had already become iconic, not as a warrior or a leader, but as a symbol, a person who had spoken into silence, not knowing who would hear her. And now, across thousands of worlds, someone had. Messages poured into the research ship. Some were scientific requests, offers to help, to study, to understand. Others were simpler. Expressions of gratitude, of awe, even of apology from cultures that had mocked the idea of humans for generations. And beneath it all, a quiet fear began to grow. If humanity had sealed away something dangerous, something they had only barely contained, what would happen if that seal ever broke? On the ship, Isa continued to sift through fragmented memory files. Some were corrupted beyond recovery. Others were slowly stabilizing. One evening, Talzak sat alone in the command deck as Asa played a short audio clip that hadn't surfaced before. Reyes, again. This time, speaking not to a log, but to herself. "If this works," she said, voice quiet, "someone will wake up in a galaxy that has no idea what really happened. And they'll have to decide what comes next, not as a hero, just as someone who remembers." The clip ended there. Talzak leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. He didn't know what Commander Reyes would be like when she woke up. He didn't know if she'd want to lead, to teach, or simply to live quietly. But one thing was certain. She would not be alone. The galaxy was no crude looking for myths. It was waiting for answers. Isaac had been silent for 2 full hours. Talzak paced slowly across the command deck of the Antares Dawn, eyes on the flickering display that mapped the status of the ship's systems. Sierra stood nearby, her gaze alternating between her datapad and the sealed chamber where Commander Reyes remained in stasis. Her vital signs were stable, but her awakening had been delayed. SAAC insisted the process had to follow protocols. No one alive fully understood. Then, without warning, the AI's voice returned. Archive system integrity stabilized. Encrypted partition recovered. Project designation: Lazarus. Talzek and Sarah both turned toward the glowing sphere at the center of the deck. "You found it," Talzek said quietly. Isa responded. "Yes. The Lazarus Directive was humanity's final contingency initiated by Commander Reyes and the High Command of the Soul Concord." Neither Talzek nor Sira had heard that name before. Soul Concord. It sounded like the last government humanity had formed before disappearing. And it carried the weight of finality. "Please display the contents," Sira said. The lights dimmed. A projection formed in the air blueprints, interface designs, and star charts. At the center was a large, spherical structure that Talzek didn't recognize. It looked like a station, but it had no weapons, no propulsion. Just layered shielding and a lattice of energy fields arranged in elegant symmetry. Project Lazarus, Isa explained, was not a weapon. It was a vault, a memory, a seed. Talzek watched in awe as the display shifted, showing the vault. Being buried beneath the surface of a barren moon, not the one they were standing on, but another one nearby. Coordinates followed, glowing faintly in the corner of the display. Sira whispered, "There's another site." Talzek nodded, "And we were meant to find this one first." Isa continued, "This ship, the Antares Dawn, was a decoy. A marker. Reyes knew the galaxy might not be ready for what was coming or what had already passed. She placed the recording device to draw attention here, to filter the signal. Only those willing to listen, to investigate, would be able to access the next step." Talzek's chest tightened. "We've been part of their plan without knowing it." "Correct," Isaac said. "Your decision to investigate demonstrated readiness. Curiosity with caution. That was the measure." The vault beneath the nearby moon contained not just data, but preserved technologies, culture, philosophy, and the building blocks of what humanity had hoped might guide future civilizations. It was never about saving themselves. It was about leaving behind a spark, not to lead, but to inspire. Talzek stared at the star chart. They never expected to return. Sira asked the question he hadn't yet dared to voice. "But Commander Reyes, she's alive. Doesn't that mean?" Lazarus failed. Isa paused longer than usual. "No, Commander Reyes remained behind voluntarily. She chose to wait in case the vault was discovered. She believed someone might need a guide, not a leader." Sira turned to Talzek. "She's meant to bridge the past and the future." Talzek understood now. The myths had never been about humans conquering or disappearing in tragedy. They were stories built around a single truth. Humanity had stepped away, quietly, on purpose. And they had done so with the hope that someone else might pick up where they left off. Isa's projection faded. The coordinates for the vault remained, glowing on the console. "You should go," Isa said. "The vault awaits. The last part of the story is there." Talzek nodded. "And Commander Reyes." Isa's lights dimmed briefly, then pulsed once. "She will be awake soon." Outside the ship, the stars shimmered across the wreckage of a long-forgotten battlefield. But now, Talzek no longer saw ruins. He saw a message one that had crossed centuries of silence, and it wasn't finished yet. The chamber was silent except for the soft rhythm of the stasis unit's hum. The glow inside it had shifted from a cold blue to a pulsing amber, signaling that the revival sequence was underway. Talzek stood just outside the glass, eyes fixed on the still figure within. Commander Juno Reyes looked unchanged from the recordings, her uniform dark and worn, her expression calm, even in sleep. But the monitors above her pod now displayed signs of returning life. Breathing, neural activity, stabilized pulse. Sira stood beside him, hands clasped in front of her. "Do you think she'll remember?" Talzek nodded slowly. "She wasn't put here by accident. She chose this. I think she'll remember everything." Isaac's voice came through gently from the overhead speakers. Final sequence complete. Biological systems active. Vital signs nominal. Cognitive restoration in progress. A hiss escaped the pod as pressure equalized. Slowly, almost reverently, the chamber slid open. Its cool mist spilled across the floor. Reyes remained still for a moment longer, her eyes closed, her hands resting at her sides. Then, with a slow and steady motion, she took her first breath in over 5 centuries. Her eyes opened. Talzek froze not in fear, but in awe. There was something profound in that moment. A myth, a memory, a name that had once only lived in fragments. Now blinking quietly in front of him, Reyes sat up slowly. Her eyes scanned the room, then settled on Talzek. Her voice, when it came, was steady, almost casual. "You're not with the Concord," she said softly. Talzek swallowed and stepped forward. "No, I'm Talzek Fren, historian. You were a story to us until we found your recording." She nodded slightly, as if she had expected that answer. "How long?" she asked. 512 years, Sira answered quietly. Reyes exhaled. Then the seal held. Talzek helped her out of the pod. Her movements were careful but purposeful, like someone waking from a dream, not confusion. Her gaze swept across the chamber and settled on the ship's console. "Isac," she asked. Commander Isa replied. "Welcome back." She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, something had changed. She wasn't just a person waking up, she was a witness, the last of her kind. "You found the Lazarus vault?" she asked. Talzek nodded. "Isaas gave us the coordinates. We haven't opened it yet. We thought you should be there." A faint smile touched her lips. Then it worked. Reyes walked with them to the main deck. As they moved through the ship's corridors, she passed the preserved remains of her crew rooms. Untouched, systems dormant. Her expression held no sadness, only memory. "They knew the risks," she said quietly. "They believed in what we were doing. We all did." When they reached the viewport, she stood there for a long time, looking out at the broken planet below. Talzek watched her in silence, knowing this moment belonged to her. She finally turned to him. "The galaxy must look very different now." Talzek offered a gentle smile. "It's grown, but it still asks the same questions. It still wonders where it came from." Reyes nodded slowly. "Then we still have work to do." Isaac's voice echoed softly. "Transport vessel to vault coordinates prepared. Final access requires command input." Reyes placed her hand on the console. "Authorization, Reyes, Juno. Proceed." As the ship turned toward the nearby moon, Talzek felt the weight of history shift around him. He wasn't just standing beside a living human anymore. He was standing beside a bridge between eras, a story that had waited to be finished, and now, with the galaxy watching, it would be. The Antares dawn moved silently through the void, carrying its precious cargo toward the barren moon marked on the star charts. Talzek stood beside Commander Reyes on the bridge, watching the pale orb grow larger in the VIEWPORT dot around them. The ship's systems hummed with renewed lifelights, flickered softly. Consoles activated, and the steady pulse of Isaac's voice guided their approach. "This vault," Reyes began, her eyes reflecting the stars outside, "was never meant to be just a storehouse. It was humanity's hope, a message to the future, a chance to share what we learned, what we dreamed." Talzek nodded. "We thought humans were a myth. Now, you're here, and the vault awaits." Reyes gave a small, almost wistful smile. "We chose to step back so others could move forward. But some things must be remembered to be truly understood." As the ship descended toward the moon's surface, the vault came into view, Massive structure buried beneath the dust. Its smooth, metallic surface catching the faint light of distant suns. Energy fields shimmered around it like a protective veil, a silent sentinel guarding its secrets. Isa AC began the unlocking sequence, and the barriers faded one by one. The vault door slid open, revealing corridors lined with artifacts, data cores, and preserved memories inside. Talzek and Reyes moved together, their footsteps echoing softly in the quiet space. The walls displayed stories of humanity's triumphs and struggles, scientific achievements, art, music, and even personal journals and tuneless intimate windows into lives long past, but never forgotten. This is more than history, Talzek said. It's a legacy. Reyes nodded. It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope can endure. That knowledge can bridge the gap between myth and reality. As they reached the central chamber, Reyes activated a console. A holographic projection blossomed into life images of planets, stars, and a vast network of interconnected worlds. This was the dream, she said softly. Not just survival, but connection, understanding, a galaxy united by curiosity and compassion. Talzek felt a stirring of something profound, a sense that this was not the end of a story, but the start of countless new ones. Suddenly, the panel chimed. Sira's voice crackled through. Talzek, you should see this, on the main screen. Transmissions flooded in from worlds near and far. Messages of welcome, offers of alliance, and most of all, expressions of wonder. The news of humanity's return had spread faster than anyone imagined. Reyes watched with quiet satisfaction. They're ready, Talzek smiled, and so are we. Outside, the stars glittered with new light. The galaxy had awakened from its slumber, drawn forward by a myth made real. Commander Reyes turned to Talzek. Will you join me to help share what we have found? Talzek considered the question, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility. Yes, he said finally. Let's tell the story that was never meant to be forgotten. Together, they stepped into the vast chamber, ready to open the vault, not just to knowledge, but to a future. A future where myths were no longer just stories. They were beginnings.